Yeah, ma'am. Just 1 minute. As soon as
Oh,
Sarfraz
yeah.
sir gives us a message, we can start.
Okay, sure. Okay.
Okay. Good afternoon to all of you. Uh, wishing you all a very good afternoon. Hello and welcome to today's webinar. I thank everyone for taking time out and being here today. We will be running a live session of the whole webinar, and thus, if you miss anything, don't worry, you will be able to catch it up soon. To maintain a smooth continuity of the session, I would request all the participants to mute their microphones off until required, and informing you that we will be having the question answer session at the end of this session, which will be notified to you. So you can then text your questions in the text box. So without much delay, I would like to introduce today's presenter to you. We have here Dr. Meeta Saxena ma'am, PhD. She runs her own PT clinic, physiotherapy clinic since 1991 in Vadodara, and she is a senior consultant and HOD of physiotherapy department at KG Patel Children Hospital, Karalibag, Vadodara since 1987. She received the CP Nair Oration Award by IAP in 2006. For her outstanding contribution, she was also awarded by Dr. Brian Mulligan at CMP International Conference in 2014. She has also been awarded the Physio Ratna Award by IAP at Gujarat State Conference in 2019. She was invited for training physiotherapists at Kabul, Srinagar, and Rajkot and other venues, and has presented as much as 12 research papers at national conferences, out of which 2 have won the Best Paper Awards. She is also a good orator, teacher, trainer for the senior physiotherapy students as well. Above all, she conducts many trainings and workshops in many areas. Her current area of research is in fitness of adolescents and children. So, on the behalf of BITS fraternity, I welcome Meeta ma'am for today's session. So, we will start today's session and I request Dr. Meeta ma'am to take over today's session. Ma'am?
Thank you, Purvi. Thank you for the introduction. Good afternoon to all the principal, the staff, and the students of Babaria Institute of Physiotherapy. And thank you for inviting me to do this webinar today. Purvi, can we have the slides? Achha, okay, I have the slides back on. So today's session is basically focusing on the high-risk baby, or what we call a neonate. Okay, and I am going to discuss a little bit about what is a neonate and the role that mostly at this level, actually, it's basically the pediatric physiotherapists or physiotherapists who are specifically trained in pediatrics who can handle such small, fragile infants. If you are able to see the slide right now, you can see an incubator and you can see this very small, tiny newborn lying over there and fighting for his life. And what concerns us more than anything is the developmental outcomes of these children. Next slide, please. Purvi, next slide. Yeah. So now, what is a high risk baby? When we say that we are going to treat a high risk baby, what is a risk baby? So any child, first of all, who has a problem that requires the child to go into an neonatal ICU, which is a newborn ICU, is obviously a risk child because there has been some problem. Now, the factors that can make this child high risk can be antenatal factors. That means there was a problem when the child was in the uterus of the mother. So it could be mother got some infections, a history of trauma, history of falls, history of substance abuse, any of those. Then perinatal causes could be the way the child was born. Was the child born, there was a leaking meconium, or the child had asphyxia, or there was a very prolonged birth, or the child got caught inside the birth canal, or there could be postnatal factors, which is like septicemias or hemorrhagic infections or seizure disorders. Now, any of these factors make this child high risk, and this child is then admitted to the ICU. And where the first thing is, of course, to make sure the homeostatic, the heart rate, respiratory rate, to stabilize this little baby. And also what we are worried about is how is this child going to develop as the child grows. So therefore, the key role for pediatric physiotherapists is how do we screen this baby. And we know, because most children who are high risk, only 4 to 8% children will have a poor developmental outcome. Otherwise, if you are able to save the baby, almost 90% children do fairly well. So how do you know? Next slide, please. How do you know which child is going to do well and which child is not? So other than that, once the child is lying in the NICU, see, it's now the technology is so good that we are able to save these little babies, even the ones who are born really early and all of these. And we are able to stabilize them. We have ventilators, we have vein flows and all of this technological advances. But the environment and the risk factor can affect the developmental outcome of this child. And therefore, the role of the pediatric physiotherapist is to modify and give caregiving methods which will help to support this child's development. Next, please. So, the evidence shows now that the evidence shows that neuromotor or neurosensory development of the high-risk infant can be affected both because the child has had some kind of a problem, and also the NICU environment itself can affect it. Next. And therefore, what we do is, what is ESP is what we call an early stimulation program, or DSC, that is developmental supportive care, as it's now called, is what is the need of the day. So remember that for any infant, whether the infant is high risk or normal, development of that child is always going to be dynamic in nature. Now, usually the prenatal brain benefits from the environment of the womb of the mother itself, and that helps in shaping the womb. So in a healthy pregnancy, the uterine environment for the child is what helps to support the developmental outcome. However, in a child who's born early, or who has who has a history of problems during birth, this child will have problems in their sensory motor functions. Next. So next, please.
Ma'am, just to sorry to interrupt, ma'am. Can you keep your screen, your mobile slightly apart so that your video is cleared?
Okay. Is this better? Now? Okay.
Yeah. Okay, ma'am. Fine. Thank you, ma'am.
Yeah. Next slide, please. So as you can see, yeah, the next one. Right. So now this is, you can see, these are two children lying in the NICU. The child on the left, you can see, has also been put on some warm clothing. Now, one of us has actually picked up this child to be able to see how the child is performing in a position of what we call ventral suspension. Okay. So you can see that the vein flow is there, and you can see that the child's legs are crossing. So already that gives me a signal that something might be wrong. And if you see the child that's lying on the right side of the screen, you can see that baby is just lying in the incubator, and there is no positioning being given to that child. So this is how often the child is lying in the NICU. Now it is our job to make sure that we are able to give enough support, enough swelling. As we go along, this will become clear, because the first thing we want is that this baby should be able to organize adaptive behaviors. Next. Now, if you see in the next slide, the two brains that are given on the left side of the screen, both the brains are of premature children. The brain on the top is only a 23-week gestational age. Now, a full-term baby is actually 40 weeks. This is a 23 weeker, and the brain on the lower side is a 30 weeker. So both are premature, but you can see the difference in the brains. In the brain on the top, there is hardly any white matter. There is no gyri development. There is a thinning of the corpus callosum. And on top of that, the child, as you can see, is lying in a NICU environment. So anyway, the brain is immature, plus the problem is augmented because of the NICU environment. Next, please. So what happens in a normal baby is that in a normal baby who is in the utero, actually the last 6 to 8 weeks of gestation, that means 7 months to 9 months, that is the time where there is a refinement of the sensory motor tone and function. So if a child is born at 30 weeks, he's actually 10 weeks early. That means all the refinement of your motor functions, your sensory motor functions has not happened at all. So naturally, this child is going to present with disorganized behaviors. And also the early development of this child, the pathway is going to be affected unless we are able to do something about it. Next. So in a lot of children, especially the premature children, they could also have problems that they may or may not be premature. They may have seizure disorders. They may have what we call hypoxic and ischemic encephalopathies. Now in these child, actually what happens is that the primary skills. So what are the primary skills are the neonatal reflexes that the child is born with. For example, the child is rooting, the child is sucking. A full-term normal newborn infant knows how to seek the mother's breast so that they can feed and they are able to grow. They know how to hold the finger of the mother and so on because of the palmar grasp. So these may be absent, reduced, or inconsistent in our preterm infants. And therefore, we have to help this child to organize the effective adaptive behaviors. Next, please. So what happens is, what is neurodevelopmental progress? It is the concern of every child, every doctor, therapist, nurse, everybody who's dealing with a small infant. It is our concern to see how will this child progress. The child who's lying, suppose we have 30 children, in children hospital, we have 35 incubators for newborns. Plus we have another 10 incubators for very, very fragile infants. So the concern is all of these children are not going to have some kind of developmental disability or delay. Only a few of them will have. So how do you figure out which child is going to have a problem and which child is not? So that is where we need assessment. So the examination of the newborn, which is the job of a pediatric physiotherapist, is what lets us know that do we have some problem and how much and what kind of developmental support we need to give these children. So next, please. Now, what are the subsystems that we look for? What are these subsystems? Obviously, the first thing of paramount importance is the autonomic system, because the child's respiratory rate, heart rate, digestion, the color of the baby, is he cyanotic, is he in pallor? All of these are very important. And this is the part of stabilizing this infant to first survive, right? Then we look at the next subsystem, which is motor. There we look at the postures of the child, the tone, the movement. Then we look at the state. Now, what is state actually? States are graded from 1 to 6, where grade 1 is deep sleep, grade 2 is REM sleep, then grade 3 is like awake and quiet, then grade 4 is little bit overactive, grade 5 is crying and cranky. So we not only look at what is the state of the child, but a normal child is normally able to transition very easily from one state to the other. That means if you're putting your baby to sleep, he'll go to sleep. When you want the baby gets hungry, he wakes up, he asks for food and all. Now, our fragile children in the NICU are not able to transition from these states. And therefore, this is something that is very, very important for organization of the baby's development. So state is something that we look into. Then we look at the attention of the child. Is the child able to open the eyes? If you call him, is there some response to vision? Is there some response to touch? Is there some response to sound? And all of these. So, and again, how is the attention of the baby while transiting from one state to the other? And the last is self-regulation. Is this child able to self-regulate his systems? Okay, so these are the things that we look at when we are assessing the newborns. Next. Now, remember that the infant is always seeking any newborn child is actively seeking the next differentiation. So he is actually, and plus he is relying that there will be a good environment provided to the child so that he can progress. For example, if he wants milk, he knows the mother is going to pick the baby up, mother is going to cradle in her hands and then take the baby to the breast, right? So the child knows this kind of support is going to be available. Now, our child who's lying in the incubator is a fragile infant, and they may not be able to do that. And therefore, if there is a mismatch between the experience the child is going through, then you are going to have a developmental issue. Now, these are the 3 assessment protocols that we use in Children Hospital and in most places in India now. There are some other scales which are used in some other hospitals, but mostly we are using these standardized tools. The first one is the new Ballard scale. It has got external and neurological criteria. For development, we use only the neurological criteria. Then we use the APIB, or we use the Prechel and Bintema manual. This is a manual which helps us assess each and every part of the baby's growth and development. And lastly, we do what we call the DASI, which is the developmental assessment scale, which is standardized on Indian infants, which is why it's called DASI. It was based on the Bailey's infant scale. So these are the 3 standardized tools we use to assess the baby. Now, this is a picture which will show you, next please, which will show you the new Ballard scale. Next, yeah. As you can see, there is a score. No. Go to the Ballard scale, please. Purvi? Yes, thank you. So now this is a scale which gives us a very good idea of the infant's neuromuscular maturity. Now, if you see the first thing, I hope you can read over here, but the posture of the child is graded from 0 to 4. 4 is a full-term normal infant. This is how the posture should be. That means the arms and the legs are at 45 degrees angle. Now, your premature child can be lying as the posture that is seen in level 1 or the score as 0. That means they are just lying with their hands and legs extended and lying limply like that. That is not good. Similarly, each thing, for example, arm recoil. Now, arm recoil, again, when you pull at the child's hands, it should go back into the recoil position, which is seen in the score 4 of the posture. Okay. Your child who's premature or who's had a seizure may just be after, when you extend the hands of the baby, the arms will stay extended. So this is how we score everything. And then it gives us an idea as to how your baby is performing. Next, please. So when we do our key assessments, we look at each and every subsystem. We look at the degree of modulation. That means how is the balance of these subsystems? How is the child able to progress from one transition to the other? And we look at the third thing, which is dyadic interaction. Dyadic means 1-to-1. That means the child with the baby, the child with the mother, the child with the therapist, the child with the doctor. So any 1-to-1 interaction is called a dyadic interaction. And a full-term newborn baby can actually look at the mother's face within a focal length of about 10 inches and give a smile. Okay. Now your baby is very poor in his dyadic interactions. So that is one area that we look into very importantly. Next. Now, as you can see, while we are assessing, this is how it is. Actually, the picture on the right is actually a video, but we won't be able to play it on this because Dr. Purvi does not have a hyperlink. But you can see on the pictures on the left, when I pick it up, in a ventral suspension position, there should be some amount of head lifting and leg lifting. Similarly, the child that we are pulling up, the child should be able to bring the head into midline at least. Similarly, the baby on the right side, I am actually assessing that baby. and I'm looking for ventral suspension. So it gives us an idea of the tone and the posture of the child. Next, please. And you can see different postures. These are our actual babies from the NICU. The first child on the top left, you can see the face, how it is asymmetric. You can see the fisting of the hands. And immediately it gives me a clue that this baby can have some dystonic features. If you see the same child, when we pick them up on the right side, the top right picture, you can see the child is showing some early signs of scissoring. Now the child on the bottom left, you can see one hand is flexed in a normal posture, but the other hand is lying limply. And the same baby on the bottom right, you can see the right hand is extended. And this child has got a brachial plexus injury. And as you can see, he's got an Erb's palsy and he's just lying and that arm is not able to flex. So that is how we pick up the different problems of the neonates when we go into it. Next, please. This same baby, you can see how they're lying. You can see the fisting of the palm. The thumb is completely inside. There is a dystonic tendency. You can see the legs are in a scissoring position. So when we do the assessment, we will look at the DASI. We will assess the primitive reflexes. We will look at the Moro. We will look at some of the superficial reflexes like the your abdominal reflex, then the deeper reflexes like you will assess for flexor withdrawal, for extensor thrust, for crossed extension, palmar grasp, plantar grasp. All of these are what we see. We also check for vision, for hearing, and any other problems. Congenital problems, for example. Next slide, please. So one of the children that we assessed, this is how they grew up to be. When you pick up in a newborn, when you pick up the scissoring patterns, we hope that our developmental support will help this child to integrate into normal. But if they don't, then they will turn out to be like a diplegic cerebral palsy or something. These are the children who had a risk factor at the early newborn stage, and then as they grew, they turned out to have some problems, or they were either cerebral palsy or any other movement disorders. Next, please. Now, this is a huge, some of the evidences that I have presented. These are all new evidences. This was a systematic review presented in 2017. And they have actually said that because there are so many advances in the neonatal intensive care, that we are able to save younger children, children with difficulties, very premature children. Earlier, like 20 years back, it was very difficult for a 28-weeker or a 25-weeker, 26-weeker child to survive. So the mortality rate of the child was very much higher. Now we are able to save these small infants. They are born too early, but we are able to save them because we have so much good technology. We have surfactants, all of these problems. So the mortality rate has gone down a lot, but the morbidity is now increasing. And that is what they found in this systematic review, that a lot of neurodevelopmental problems, neurocognitive problems, and motor sequelae, all of these were found to a higher level now because we are saving these early children. So they actually assessed a huge number of children, infants who were born below 36 weekers. So they were all premature, and they found that more than the motor sequelae, these children were more at risk for attention deficit hyperactivity disorders, autistic spectrum disorders, and your ADDs, attention deficit disorders, later on in life. By the time they reached school levels or primary levels, by the time they were 2 or 3 years old, they found that they had lots of school difficulties and they had problems of academic, coping up with academic activities. Next. So remember that because these premature children, they have a longer extrauterine. Obviously, when they are born early, they are out of the uterine environment much earlier. So they have a longer exposure. And this alters, this is what this study found, it alters the brain structure. Even if there are no other brain injuries, like there is no seizures, there is no HIE, there is no septicemia or infections, even then, these children have a problem, and plus the brain development is further compromised because there is a sensory overstimulation in the NICU itself. Because if your child is very small, they may spend anything from 3 weeks to 6 weeks in the NICU. So they are lying in an environment where there are bright flickering lights, there is lots of noise because there are beeps coming from the ventilator, there is a beep from the pulse oximeter, then the baby has tubes going in, every now and then somebody is handling the child. This child also has a lot of painful procedures happening because you do the venipunctures, you do your heel lancing, nasal suctioning every now and then to clear the chest and all of that. So there is a lot of repetitive pain as well. And these NICU stressors, they found that other than the prematurity factor, the stress from the NICU itself is associated with decreased brain size, both in the frontal and parietal regions. There was a problem of connectivity within the temporal lobes, and the lateralization of the baby, especially for those children born before 30 weeks of gestation, was actually the lateralization was severely affected. That means the coordination that we have from the left hemisphere of the brain to the right, which is connected by the corpus callosum, all of those structures were severely affected in these children. There was another systematic review in 2016, and they found that premature children have more than just motor disorders. They have what we call SPD. SPD is sensory processing difficulties or disorders. And they can be discrimination. SDD is discrimination disorders, or sensory SBMD is sensory-based motor disorders. All of these are found in preterm children, especially up to the age of 3 years. And these are the children who have behavioral dysfunctions, and they may have ADHD, or they may have autistic spectrum disorders, and all of these. And in these children, the problems found in this group was both over and under responsibility to the sensory stimuli. So next, I think, next please. Yeah, so I think this we have done. Next one. Yes, let's go to, so I've just talked about this one. Let's go to the next slide, please. Okay, this is the one I showed. Yeah. Yeah, we've seen this slide before, so we can go to the next slide. Right. So now we come to developmental supportive care. Okay. So what is developmentally supportive care? That means once you have screened your baby and you have some early detection, I told you the tools that we look at. Now we look at what are we going to do? How are we going to support this infant both in the NICU environment as well as in the immediate post-NICU period that the child goes to? So that means from day one of the child's life up to at least 3 to 6 months of the baby's life, how are we going to give the supportive care so that the child is able to, we can reduce the stress on the CNS? Now, how do we reduce the stress? We have to reduce the stress both in handling of the baby. That means we call it cluster care. Cluster care means that we want that all the tubes and all the drawing of blood and all the handling of the baby, taking the temperature and doing your clearance and all, it should all be done in a cluster at one time. And then that baby is left alone in a cocooned way. I'll show you the methods of cocooning the babies. And then the child is left to try and sleep and just be quiet for some time. So this is what one of our basic aims is. Then developmentally supportive care, the other thing is we want to augment self-coping behavior. Now, a normal full-term infant has inbuilt self-coping mechanisms. For example, when the child is hungry, he will start rooting. He will start looking for the mother's breast. The child wants to grasp the mother's finger. He will he uses the palmar grasp. And similarly, when the child feels wants to move, the child will start doing flexor withdrawal, alternate extensor thrust, and will move his arms and legs. So these are all reduced or absent in our high-risk infants. So we have to try and support the child's self-coping behaviors so that the baby starts organizing themselves. Now, see, it's even when we do the assessment, you cannot actually have a diagnosis put in. You can't say, "Arey, ye bacche ko to ye problem hai, so this is going to be a cerebral palsy." You can't say that. What we do as a pediatric therapist for newborns is, after we do the full assessment, we pick out what are the soft neurological signs. Soft neurological signs means there are some abnormal signs visible or picked up in this baby. However, by giving proper developmental care, these signs may integrate by the time the child is 1 month or 3 months or 6 months old. So these are not established problems that we have. And these could be tonal problems. It could be a persistent thumb in palm. Opisthotonus means the child is throwing the neck backwards in extension. That is opisthotonus. So again, that is a neurological, soft neurological sign. And ATNR tendency, asymmetrical tonic neck reflex, that means persistently the child is going into an ATNR posture. That could be there. Then if you are picking up reduced adductor angles, so if your angles, usually in a full-term newborn, the adductor angle with bent legs should be about 160, and with straight legs it should be about 90 degrees. So if it is too mobile, if you're going into full abduction, then your child is floppy. If you are not able to get even 90 degrees or with bent legs 160 degrees, then your child is showing extra or hypertone in the hips. So this gives you an idea about the child's tone as well as the mobility. So the rule of the thumb is that if you pick up 2 or more soft neurological signs, that child definitely needs to get developmental supportive care and needs monitoring for at least 6 months to 1 year of life. Next, please. So this is how the team works. And what we do is, for developmental care, is that we want to partner with the families, because like I told you, what is a dyadic interaction? We want the mother to interact with the baby. We want the father to interact with the baby. We want to give proper postures, positioning and handling skills. We want to make sure this child gets some quiet time and some sleep. We want to minimize the stress from the NICU environment and reduce the pain the child is going through. And we want to optimize the nutrition, all of these. So as quickly as possible, we want that this baby starts feeding. Next, please. So this was another huge systematic review where they searched 5 databases, and this was published in April 2019. Next, please. There were 18 articles, and they gave a lot of guidelines about early intervention in infants with potential brain damage. This huge study actually came about, and they gave a lot of guidelines. And they said that early parent-infant interaction is pivotal or very, very important in promoting the cognitive, social, and behavioral developmental pathway of this growing baby. So this is very important. So like in a lot of hospitals in India, like in Children Hospital in Baroda, I know KEM Hospital in Bombay, KEM Hospital Pune, they are what we call baby-friendly hospitals. That means as early as possible, even in a sick baby who's lying on the incubator, we encourage the mother to come in with proper hygiene, and we encourage the mother to come in and start cooing to the child, start touching the baby and all of that. Next, please. So we want that this study actually found that there was, if your child is in the NICU and has some risk factors and has gone through a period of trauma, the mother actually is very less sensitive to the child's behavioral and other outcomes as compared to mothers of newborn babies. Now, when you have a normal delivery and you take a full-term baby home on the 2nd or 3rd day, you know, the mother, the grandmother, they start going to the baby, how beautiful, look at me, give me a smile, all of that. Now, the child who's lying in the NICU, their mother and father are actually so stressed that all they are worried about, "Maro bachchu bachi jaise," Is my child going to survive? Is the baby okay? Is the child feeding? Is there any weight gain? So they are not looking into their interaction, what we call dyadic interaction, and they are actually just very, very stressed out, which is also normal. So our job as pediatric physiotherapists is to help this mother to build up a good quality of interaction with the baby. And this is what we help them with. Next, please. So as you can see, we will encourage the mother to hold the baby in the hand, bring the baby close, smile to the baby, talk to the baby, maintain some visual contact, and so on. Next, please. So we now come to what we call, it is called the NIDCAP program. This is what is recommended. This is what early developmental supportive care is about. It is called the Newborn Individualized Developmental Care and Assessment Program. So the goals are to maximize physical, mental, and emotional growth. And the NIDCAP approach helps to minimize the problems that are arising from sensory overloads to the infant because of the NICU environment, because like problems of excessive lighting, excessive noise, the pain the child goes through, frequent handling, and frequent medical interventions. Next. Again, this was a huge 15-year systematic review. And what they found was that specifically for those children who are dealing with pain, pain is when you know that there is a lot of heel lancing, there are tubes going in, there is a vein flow in, the child is on a ventilator, the child is being fed through a tube, and all of those, this child is bound to have pain. So the therapies that we want to give for these babies are, first of all, non-nutritive sucking. Non-nutritive sucking you can give with a pacifier or a soother nipple, and you can give it both with or without a sucrose according to the doctor's advice, because the children who have mothers who have maternal diabetes or gestational diabetes, those children may have increased sugar levels, so they may not be we are not supposed to give them any sucrose. So you may give NNS with or without sucrose. Then you give KMC's kangaroo mother care. That is a skin to skin placement of the baby prone on the mother's chest with no clothing in between. That is what we give. Encourage the mother. That helps. There's a huge Brazilian study which says that KMC actually helps this baby to gain weight much faster and for the tactile and sensory inputs to organize themselves better. Then we teach them how to do the swaddling. You can see the child on the right side of the screen. This is the way. I'll come to more swaddling, but this is how we can give multisensorial stimulation in this kind of position we can give. And of course, we encourage them, the mother, to talk to the child, to give soft music playing in the NICU and so on. Next. Now remember that in a full-term normal infant, it is the flexion attitude that predominates. Okay. Now in your child who's premature, they may be just lying with the arms and legs in extension. And the flexion attitude, so because of the position of the baby, the tactile system gets disorganized. In a normal full-term child, when you check for adaptive response to touch, the localized response is, for example, rooting, and diffused responses, for example, crying to a wet diaper. So you check your high-risk infant and see what is the altered state and the arousal of the child to your touch, or the different touches that the child is going through in the NICU. And then you have to regulate the response. Next. Gravity plays a huge part in the development of the child, of the growing child. So the Moro is actually a part of the vestibular system. So in an incomplete Moro, immediately it gives us a signal that the vestibular system is not fully functioning, because the Moro is the adaptive response to a well-functioning vestibular system. So prematures often will have incomplete or absent Moros. And what helps these children is rocking and rhythmic movements. Next, please. We also sometimes provide air beds or water beds. That keeps the baby going. Even in the incubator, you can place a air or a water mattress, and that keeps the vestibular stimulation going. Next, please. Then remember proprioception. Proprioception is one of the basic senses that we have, and that is what helps the infant's movements. When the baby moves in the mother's arm, when you place the baby on the shoulder and he adjusts the head, adjusts the hand movements, makes sure the hands and legs are moving. All of these is because your proprioceptors are working well. So in a premature baby, these may be decreased or absent, and therefore we give some proprioceptive inputs. We give a lot of these inputs both in the NICU itself, and then we teach it to the mother. Next, please. Um, Vision and auditory perception is anyway not that well organized at birth, even in a full-term baby. And it's even further disorganized in a high-risk infant. So what happens is that uh, actually the neck muscles, the tone of the neck muscles helps the vision and the eye-hand coordination to develop. So if your child is lying limply and you cannot put this child in prone position or in sideline position, because if a child is lying on the ventilator, is just lying in supine position, then the neck muscles will not get enough stimulus or tone, and they are going to be hypotonic, and that is going to affect the vision of the child in terms of that. Plus the auditory perception again gets disorganized, both because of the position of the child as well as because of either excessive sounds in the NICU or not the correct sounds. So this is where we help the child with proper positions. And if you don't have good auditory perception in the first few months of your life, this child is always going to end up with delayed speech development. Next. Smell and taste are actually very well organized at birth. The sucking response is an adaptive response to the mother's smell and to the taste of the mother's milk. Now, the NICU odor, there is so much smell in the NICU because of wiping, because of sterilium, because of spirit, because of the child lying in the incubators. All of these disturbs the child's sense of smell and taste. So we encourage the mother to come closer to the baby as soon as possible. We give kangaroo mother care. We encourage the child to, even if the child is not able to suck or this thing, we give the kangaroo mother care so the child can get the mother's smell and the smell of the milk. Next, please. Now we come to some of the postural positions that we want to give. So what is nesting? According to the NIDCAP program, nesting is how your baby is actually lying in the NICU. So obviously it is not the best position for a child to be in. Any child who's lying in the incubator is not in a good position in any case. So it is our job to help this child to maintain some kind of symmetrical flexed body postures. And we should encourage this in all the positions of supine, prone, as well as sideline. Next, please. Now, sideline sometimes can be a very good position to keep the child in the incubator because of two things. First of all, in sideline, it is easy to give proprioception into the limbs. You can give gentle joint compressions, gentle proprioception from the hands into the shoulder girdle and into the pelvic girdle. It is easy to give a weight shift experience. Also, a midline, the child's hands obviously will go into the midline. And also, very importantly, it gives some amount of support to the rib cage. So a child who's got a poor respiratory rate, a poor heart rate, it helps to support the rib cage and facilitates the respiration. Next, please. See, this is how, as soon as the child is out of the ventilator, we start giving weight shifts in sideline positions. And you can see there is a cloth in between the two legs because we want to promote flexion attitude and symmetry. So this gives a little flexion attitude, it gives symmetry, and you can give your postural and proprioceptive inputs. Next. Now, nesting in prone. Actually, if a child is not maintaining good homeostasis, that means there's a lot of fluctuation and is not able to maintain respiration and heartbeats without the ventilator or without oxygen, then rib cage support with prone position actually helps to stabilize and it eases the work of breathing. But because a small infant is born, Purvi, can I get the slide back, please? Yeah. When a small child is born, if the child is below 34 weeks, yeah, if the child is below 34 weeks, they don't have enough tone in the neck muscles and in the spine. And next slide, please. And so what happens is this baby is not able to lift the head against gravity. Plus, if the child is on a ventilator or on a feeding tube or on an oxygen mask or on a phototherapy hood, then this baby is, you cannot place this child prone because you have to keep a watch on the face all the time. And therefore, in a child who's fairly stable, we prefer to give a prone position. But a child who's very, very unstable or is very premature, it's better to go for sideline or, of course, supine. Next, please. Now, for very fragile infants, that means if your baby is really premature and very fragile, or they have an intrauterine growth retardation, it means the baby is very small, birth weight, the weight is hardly 2 kg or even 1.5 kg, then supine is the better position to nest this child. And therefore, but even then, make sure you can see the baby, the two babies over there. The second baby is being swaddled so nicely so that some of midline symmetry and flexion is being maintained. And then you keep doing a little bit of gentle head turning every 3 hours or 2 hours so that the baby gets both the sides inputs. Next. Now, a lot of the time, because the child is not maintaining temperature, what they do is to keep the baby, the NICU environment is already kept little warm. But other than that, they keep a lot of mittens, to make sure that distally the child is not getting cold. So, but remember that self-coping mechanisms and your plantar and palmar grasps become disturbed because of these mittens. And therefore, it is our job, whenever we go at least 2 or 3 times a day, we remove the mittens, we give those sensory inputs, and then only place the mittens back. And once the child is given to the mother at home, the same thing, we tell them that if the baby is maintaining good temperature, please do not let this child wear mittens and foot socks. Next. Yeah. Again, okay. Now, sensory motor oral stimulation is very, very important. Because the first thing you want to do to your baby is, who's been on oxygen, who's been on ventilator, you want this child to start developing the sucking and the rooting mechanism, and so that the baby goes on to breastfeed as early as possible. You don't want to continue to maintain tube feeding or artificial feeding for very long. And we have been able to help our risk babies to establish as early as possible the breastfeeding mechanism, because not only does breastfeeding and all help the oromuscular oromotor, but it also helps to organize the tactile and the vestibular systems and proprioception. So we have some trigger points that we use, and we stimulate these trigger points, and we give some particular tactile stimulus to the mouth and to the tongue every 2 hours, especially just before we start feeding the child. So the child starts relating those points and movements to the that now it is time for the baby to feed. And then we try and see if we can coax the baby to go onto the mother's breast. Next, please. So finally, just to sum up all the strategies, the NIDCAP program, actually we divide it into 2 parts. One is the strategy, which is given to all the babies in the NICU. Every single child in the NICU, because they are potentially at risk, are given these. That means, what are the common strategies? They will, to augment the self-coping mechanisms, give cooing sounds, give hand and feet bracing, give sucking, stimulate sucking. If you can't do it by the mother's breast, then use the pacifiers. So non-nutritive sucking is very important. The second point is you have to give the visual stimulus. So visual stimulus, remember that the focal length of even a full-term newborn baby is just about 12 inches. A preterm baby might have even less. So whatever stimulus you are given, preferably the mother's face or your face, Sorry. Purvi, you want to describe this? Purvi, would you like to describe?
Yeah, ma'am. Third point, right, ma'am?
The visual stimulus.
Okay. Actually the newborns and they have age related, like they have some preference for some special colors
Yeah.
as well as some special patterns.
Hmm.
So we also can use some form of patterns like checks or some black and white colors or red colors, so that they can fix their gaze over that area, and the mother can also act as a good visual stimulus so
Yeah.
that the child can fix his or her gaze towards that mother,
Yeah.
and thus she can also move her head to the either side so that the child can also initiate the head and neck movements.
Exactly. Thank you so much, Purvi. And similarly, auditory stimulus. If the child is very overstimulated, then we reduce the noise in the NICU and we give cooing movement sounds. We give soft music, all of those. And of course, we have to give the oromotor and tactile stimulus. Next slide, last slide, I think. Yeah. Now, for some infants, it is very important to give specific care. So they need more than just the generalized care that we give to all the high risk infants. So these children, again, depending on how the child is presenting during your screening, you will give decreased or increased visual and auditory stimuli. For all premature children, we encourage kangaroo care. If your child is jittery and hypertonic, then we give cocooning, midline positioning, and proprioception. Tactile stimulation can be given. It's very, very important. You can give stroking, deep stroking, just pressure, rocking, massage, soft swinging. Sometimes when the child goes home, we encourage them to give a little bit of rocking in warm water tubs so that because the baby was born too early, especially in the premature children. So the intrauterine environment is sort of taken care of. So this helps with growth and behavioral development and reduces pain. And lastly, most importantly, it is our job to train the mother and the family, both in dyadic interaction, how to interact with the baby one to one, as well as how the baby is going to be handled at home, which postures to encourage, which kind of tactile stimuli to give. So training of the mother and the rest of the family is very, very important in our scenario. Thank you. Purvi, I think we can ask for questions if anybody has. Purvi? Hello? 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 Yeah. Hello? Purvi? Can we have some questions? Can you hear me? Hello?
Hello, I guess the program is having some issue. Hello, I'm Rishikesh here. Good afternoon.
Okay. Any questions?
Yeah, anyone is having question, please type the questions in the message box, please.
I think Purvi will have to take the questions because she is presenting.
Yeah.
Sorry, all of you, my network just I lost my connectivity. So it was a very good session. I request all the participants who have doubts, they can just text into the text box so that I can
Yeah,
continue the question answer session.
sure.
Ma'am, there is a question from Dhwani Chanpura. She's asking whether can you please tell her some scales or tools for the assessment of preterm infants?
So I told you, the ones that we are using is the APIB. Then we are using the new Ballard scale or the Dubowitz neurological criteria. And we are using the Prechel manual. Those were the three tools. Purvi, can you go back and
Yeah.
just put those three assessment scales back on the screen?
Yeah, ma'am.
These are the three we are using. Some people also use the NBAS, which is the Brazilian Neuro Developmental Scale, but we don't use it in our context because the NBAS is actually standardized on Western children. And we prefer to use scales which are standardized on Indian infants. So the DASI is completely on Indian infants. And the other screening tools, the new Ballard scale, the new Ballard scale has now been extended to take care of very premature children also. So even the 28 weekers we can assess on the new Ballard scale. The angles that I showed you.
Yeah, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am.
Question? Yeah.
Next question is from Dr. Dharmesh, sir. He's asking whether does proprioceptive stimulation help to gain muscle power?
Yes, eventually there will be muscle power. Yes, it helps. See, once the muscles and the proprioceptors start organizing themselves and they coordinate with both the tactile and vestibular stimulation, the child's movements will increase. Only the muscle power will come when the child starts moving themselves, right? An active movement. Now, if your child is just lying without movements, lying in the NICU with no active movements, naturally the power is going to be less. So proprioception along with touch and positioning helps the child to organize the system so that they start doing the active movements. You can also use neonatal reflexes. For example, if the child is just lying limply and I want the child to take the leg into flexion, for example, then I might give a flexor withdrawal stimulus and hope that that stimulus will encourage this baby to flex the leg. So sometimes we do that as well. And that is how the power will slowly increase.
Yeah, ma'am. Thank you. Next question is from Dr. Dhara Shah. She's asking whether, can you just discuss the role of physiotherapist during incubator care?
That's what I just discussed. All of this that I discussed in the whole session is when the baby is lying in the incubator. And see, now there are two ways in which the physiotherapists assess. The people who are like pediatric physiotherapists, they can actually go and do a lot more. So in my hospital, like we give the supportive care 2 times a day, and then we train the sisters are also trained for maintaining the postures, the positions, the swaddling, and the chest physiotherapy for the ones who are disturbed. So you can do that. In some hospitals in India, it's very difficult to do because we never have enough staff. But in the Western countries, sometimes they have a physio on call who is there several times a day to give that. In our hospital, we are only able to do it 2 times a day. Sometimes they can go up to 3 times for a very fragile infant. So yes, so the chest physiotherapy to the newborn or the premature child, the swaddling, the handling patterns, and the positioning, the postures. This is something the pediatric physiotherapist does.
Okay, ma'am. Thank you. Ashu Sharma is asking whether a child born with meconium aspiration, any neurological disturbances are possible in them?
It is possible, but not necessary. So a child, see, actually even children who are like say 32 weekers or 30 weekers, premature children, I have seen them with completely normal developmental outcomes. Similarly, meconium aspiration, most children will not have a long-term sequelae or a problem, but that 1 or 2% may have. And then what do you do? Unless you have screened your child during the risk factors, during the incubator period or during the period the child was in the NICU, how do you know that this child may have a problem or may not have a problem? And that is why the monitoring of the child is so important.
Okay, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am. Reema Jani is asking whether is there any risk of CDH with swaddling? How can we prevent if its risk is there?
Okay, very good question. Because in India, especially in some regions like Maharashtra and even to some extent Gujarat, what happens is that after the massage and the bath, and this is true not just for our risk babies, but also for normal children, what happens is that they will make the child like a mummy lying straight and they will wrap it tightly around after the bath, right? Now remember that at least for the first 1 month, the arms and legs should be at 45 degrees of flexion. or at least some amount of flexion. So even if you don't have a CDH, a tight swaddling in extension is going to harm your baby. And therefore, if you see my swaddling or nesting positions that I showed, everywhere, if you see, the legs were in a small amount of abduction and flexion, the hips. Now, in a child who already has a CDH, definitely you will be giving a particular position to maintain that hip into abduction. So we may want to give even we have even given 8 days or 10 days old babies. We have given an abduction splint actually. So for CDH, for sure, you will be dealing with it. But even non-CDH babies, please be very, very careful of the hip. And plus, even though you may not have a CDH at that point, but a very fragile infant, a very small baby who's hardly weighing 1.5 kg, it's very easy to subluxate their hips. And therefore, you have to be very cautious, not only in your posture, in your handling, but also the maintenance of the posture. This is very important. And I recommend to all the people, young people who I deal with, that when you're having your own baby, even when the baby is normal, full term, don't swaddle the child in extension. That is very important. Okay.
Yeah, ma'am. Thank you. Ami Trivedi is asking that she needs to know more about early stimulation.
Hello. Hello. Purvi, I've lost your sound. Hello. Purvi, we are not getting sound from you. Hello.
Hello.
Yeah, now I can hear you. What was
Yeah,
the question?
ma'am. Ma'am, Ami Trivedi wants to know something about early stimulation therapy.
Yeah, that's what I just described. The whole of the NIDCAP program is early stimulation. See, in the old days, it used to be called early stimulation. Now we call it developmental supportive care. Early stimulation is an old term. So when I started doing pediatrics, we used to call it early stimulation. The reason that now we don't use that word stimulation so much is that a lot of the time these fragile babies are already overstimulated because of the NICU environment. So the doctors who are the pediatricians who are struggling to make this child stay alive, they get very scared the minute you use the word stimulation. They say, "Hamara bachcha वैसे ही, they are not being held steady. We have no way do we want to stimulate this baby anymore." And therefore, the word or the term that we use is developmental supportive care. That is what we do. Our developmental supportive care is not necessarily giving stimulus to the child. It may be just cocooning. It may be just kangaroo mother care. It may be just swaddling. It may be just keeping the child quiet and giving a gentle pressure. So that is why the term is now not early stimulation, but it's called developmental supportive care.
Okay, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am. Ma'am, Dr. Dharmesh wants to ask whether how to prevent changing brain in epileptic child.
Changing?
How to prevent changing brain in epileptic child? Uh, I think the question has to be some specific. Dr. Dharmesh, please can you explain your question properly? Till then, we move to the next question. Ma'am, Bhumi Mathur wants to know whether if a hypersensitive, there is a hypersensitive child to tactile stimuli, what should be the intervention?
The intervention will be cocooning, swaddling, deep pressure. Never give this child light stroking. Never give that child light stroking. So give deep pressure, give swaddling, give midline, and swaddle the child so that the child remains little bit cocooned. So use a lot of side pillows. Sometimes in the NICU, in the incubator, we even use those soft, because for the children you get those soft plastic pint bottles. Even those work well for giving a little pressure and support to the baby from the sides. So use that. Do not give any light touch and do not give light stroking to a child who's hypersensitive to tactile stimuli.
Okay, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am. Kavita Pandey is asking you whether how do we do cocooning to the preterm infant?
To the preterm infant.
Yeah, ma'am.
Yeah, did you see the way we were cocooning? Now, if your preterm is fairly steady, and if the weight is around 2 kg, the child is breathing on their own, and there's not much of intervention required, then side lying kangaroo care and sometimes prone would be better positions. But if your child is very fragile, if your child doesn't have good tone, if your child is lying limply, or if your child is on oxygen or on the ventilator, then you have to cocoon that baby in supine position with proper swaddling. Okay.
Okay, ma'am. Thank you. Ma'am, can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Yes,
Yeah, ma'am.
Puri. Okay.
Ma'am, Bhumika Khandwani is asking whether can you explain the role of sensory integration therapy?
Okay. Now, see, sensory integration therapy in a newborn is just going to be the supportive care. That means how you position the child, how you swaddle the baby, what kind of inputs you give in handling. Handling is very, very important. And the amount of vision and auditory stimuli you want to give to this child. So that is important. So obviously, if your child's vestibular stimulus is not functioning fully, then you might want to give more rocking. You might want to use a air bed or a water bed for this baby, and lots of rocking the child in your in the mother's arms or in the father's arms. Those are the things you will want to give. And tactile, again, as I said, whether they are overstimulated or understimulated, it all depends on that. So sensory motor stimuli at this level are going to be, first of all, based on your screening, and secondly, they are going to be very minimal, because don't forget, at the end of the day, it's a fragile newborn infant which is lying in a special incubator on care. So your care is going to be very, very gentle and subtle. Okay.
Yeah, thank you, ma'am. I'm sorry because we have some time constraints. Ma'am, we will take 2 or 3 questions
Okay.
because there are continuously messages. That is
Yeah.
why. So I request all the participants to just we will just attend the questions that are already there in the box, right? So
Okay.
the next question is by Harsha Ram Rakhyani. She is asking whether is there any specific time period from when we can use electrical stimulation therapy for infants?
For what purpose? Why do you want to give electrical stimulation to the newborn? I would not give electrical stimulation unless my baby presents with a Erb's palsy or a brachial plexus injury or a foot drop or a nerve injury. Otherwise, why would I want to give electrical stimulation? In that case, if your child has an Erb's palsy or a brachial plexus injury, as soon as the child has stabilized in heart rate, if the child is premature, they are sucking on the mother's breast, they are being fed, they have started gaining weight. So maybe 8-10 days. In a very fragile infant, it may be 3 weeks or 4 weeks. But in a full-term normal child with the brachial plexus injury, Erb's palsy or Klumpke's palsy, you can start within a week or 8 days or so.
Okay, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am. The next question is by Vaibhavi Gadkari. She is asking about an article in which you showed a child whose brain is already underdeveloped when placed in an NICU. And he
Yes.
is possessing various stressful and painful conditions on the infant, which is causing further deterioration in brain development. So, how
Yes.
can we prevent that?
Yeah, so see, now the child was born too early, so you can't prevent that. The baby is already there. And the baby is being handled by the NICU doctors and the nurses. So that means the child is on some kind of, maybe on a ventilator support or on oxygen support or on phototherapy, or is being tube fed or being spoon fed, one of these things. So already the child is under great stress. So at this point, what you have to do is, for very, very fragile infants, mostly we keep them in either supine lying or just partial side lying, not even a full side lying, partial side lying. Just give cocooning, give swaddling, and give deep touch and pressure, and give little oromotor stimulation that helps to regulate the child's system, and decrease the sound and the visual inputs for these babies.
Yeah, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am. Ma'am, uh, next question is by Ashu Sharma. She is asking whether is there any role of early stimulation therapy in a deaf and a dumb autistic child?
So early stimulation is right now our topic is, we are dealing with a high risk infant, a newborn, right? So if your child turns out to be deaf and dumb, you will only know as the baby grows to, say, more than a month. At that time, he's not a newborn anymore. I mean, he's not a neonate. So yes, there will be problems arising from that. And actually, it is recommended that all newborns, especially stressed newborns, go through a BERA test so that we know what we are dealing with. And if they turn out to have a hearing loss or a vision loss, or then definitely they need extra support for that. Yes, in that case they would, but maybe not, it would not start in the NICU environment, possibly not, right?
Yeah, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am. Ma'am, we'll take just the last question. Is there any particular colored light which is more preferable over the others for visual sensory input?
Normally, we start with primary colors, so red, yellow, and green. However, please remember that in the NICU, there is already a lot of lighting. So that means, so actually, we advise dimming of the lights. If you want to give, I think the question was which color should be introduced to the baby when you want to give visual stimulus. In that case, start with any primary colors, preferably red, or even better, like Dr. Purvi told you, it is better to go with the human face, preferably the mother or the father or any caregiver. The baby responds best to the human face and then to any object with primary colors. So red, yellow, and green. But in the NICU, you might not want to give that much color because this baby might already be overstimulated visually because of the flickering lights coming from the ventilator, from the monitors, and all of that. So we want to, and also because the nurses are continuously watching these babies, they keep the light levels higher so that they can, from their seat also, they can see the baby's face. So actually, the NICU environment is already too well lit and has too much light. So be careful over there.
Okay, thank you, ma'am. Ma'am, just a last question by our sir, Dr. Dharmesh. He's asking whether how to prevent sudden responses like sudden sound, sudden light in an epileptic child.
Now, if the child is on has had a seizure, see, we are talking of newborns right now. So, if they have had an episode of a seizure, this child is probably on an anti-seizure medication. So, anyway, the child is going to be drowsy. Okay, but once the child comes out of the NICU and the baby goes home, then we have to advise the parents that they should not be sudden flickering colors. Don't show the mobile screen, don't show television, don't reduce your sounds, don't introduce sudden sounds. All of these are instructions. As I said, my last slide said training of the parents is very important whenever you are discharging your baby. So discharge advice is actually huge, and don't forget to call your babies back for monitoring. So give them a date and an appointment when you are, suppose your child is being discharged at 3 weeks of age. So at 1.5 months, that means 2 weeks after that, call the baby back, because there'll be so many changes in these developing moments, and then you need to reassess at that time to see how the child is performing. Okay.
Okay, ma'am. Thank you so much, ma'am. So we conclude our question answer session here. Thank you so much, ma'am. It was a very nice, wonderful session, and you gave an explicit knowledge and insight into this field of high risk babies. So, on behalf of BITS Institute of Physiotherapy, I would like to thank our founder, president, and chairman, Honorable Shri Jagdish Bhai Patel sir, and our CMD, Honorable Shri Dhruv Bhai Patel sir, and Joint Managing Trustee, Srimati Kamalben Patel ma'am, for allowing us to organize this session. And I also extend my gratitude to our campus director, Shri S.K. Patel sir. I also thank Dr. Mehul Jadhav sir, Principal BITS Institute of Physiotherapy, for giving us a free hand to arrange this session. I thank Dr. Sarfraz Nawaz Shah, Vice Principal BITS Institute of Physiotherapy, for helping organize and preside the whole session. My special gratitude to Avni ma'am, HOD Computer Department, for her continuous technical support. My special thanks to Gade Dada, who is our graphic designer, for his great creative work. I especially thank all the faculty members for lending their direct and indirect support throughout the session. Last but not the least, I would like to thank and appreciate such a great enthusiastic participation in today's webinar. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank
Thank you
you.
so much.
Thank you, Purvi. Thank you to BITS Physiotherapy College, Purvi, Dr. Rishikesh, all the staff, and all the wonderful participants who asked so many questions. That means they were listening to me. So thanks a lot. Okay.
Okay, thank you
Thank
so
you so
much,
much.
ma'am.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye, ma'am.
Bye.
Thank you so much, ma'am.